The Ottoman Empire, home to the last caliphate and the bridges between continents. How are they so big? And so, why did they collapse? Hi, my name is Fireno, and today from Fictional History want to talk about the history of the Ottoman Empire. Today I'm doing actual historical video. I'll upload my fictional video next time, but for now I'll talk about the Ottoman Empire. This is my longest video yet because the Ottoman Empire was 600 plus years old, so covering their entire history wouldn't be short. Let's start our history lesson from the beginning. During the Middle Ages, in the year 1299, the leader of one of the Turkic states in Anatolia, Osman I, declared himself Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and the empire was born. Of course, the name Ottoman Empire was directly related to the first Sultan, Osman I, and during the 14th century, the Ottoman Empire expanded towards the Byzantine, as shown on the map. Even though their siege weapon was not sufficient to capture bigger Byzantine cities, they still able to expand and took a lot of Byzantine territory. And in 1326, they captured the city of Bursa, and 9 years later, in 1339, they styled it to be their new capital as the city was relatively modern at the time. Unfortunately, around this time, Osman I passed away, and his son replaced him, and the tomb of Osman I was built in the city of Bursa, where it stood still today. Osman's son, Orhan Ghazi, took his throne as Sultan, and he began his father's legacy by trying to expand the state. He built an army of men who were paid and trained, making the first infantrymen that opposed to the previous type of army that is mostly volunteers. After being dissatisfied, he began looking for another way to gain army men. He eventually found the Janissary with the help of a relative. The troops are from the Christian families from the territory that have been conquered by the Ottoman and later will be converted to Islam and trained to be great infantrymen, making the first modern army in Europe. But they are also extremely loyal to the Sultan, that is ensured by order and law. The expansion of the Ottoman Empire was strong, as they captured Iznik and later sieged a different city called Izmit, and coming close to the doorstep of Constantinople. Then, they expanded west, taking the state of Uskador in 1338, then again to the Aegean Sea. And around this time, they expanded their influence to Gallipoli by diplomatic means, and they raided the region. But Orhan's reign was coming to an end, as in the old age of 80, he passed away, leaving the third Sultan to step in, Murad I. The new Sultan had his eyes on more territory in the Balkan, as the Ottoman pushed the Byzantine back and gaining all of Thrace, Macedonia, and parts of Bulgaria in 1382. Murad took a short break afterwards, but after his forces was prepared, they were back on the adventure, by first expanding west to the Ottoman gains Sofia, Nice, and the rest of Bulgaria, reaching the Adriatic Sea. The Ottoman was under threat, however, because of the pressure of the Principality of Karaman and the other state, which they quickly defeated and ensuring their control over western Anatolia. Although no territory is taken, and around the same time, they will see their first troublesome era. As the year 1400 rolls around, major instability and turmoil happen both internally and externally. The powerful Timur-Lane lays siege on Ankara, which is important water source for the Ottoman troops, and the death of the fourth Sultan brought chaos onto the young empire, and a civil war occurred with multiple people claiming the mantle of Sultan, struggling for supremacy. And after a long and complicated conflict, the new Sultan finally declared, Sultan Mehmed I, consolidating his power on the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire are now starting to stabilize as it get under the Sultan control, as even in the Mehmed I's death and replaced with a new Sultan, stability still stood strong. Conflict outside the empire still occurred, however, as battle against the Christian forces to the north are frequently fought. But the Ottoman push to the Balkan finally stopped. This pause, coupled with the signing of peace deal with states like Hungary and Venice, is later to be used to focus on Constantinople, on the famous siege of Constantinople by Mehmed III, the one that ended Byzantine and making the collapse of the last truly Roman Empire. Fun fact, Constantinople was not renamed to Istanbul by Mehmed III, but it will happen later. After gaining the city, they began expanding rapidly both to Europe and Asia, using advanced gunpowder technology and notably conquering the rest of Greece, Serbia, subjugating the Crimean Khanate, and many more conquests, while reforming the government structure to become more efficient and stable. Under Sultan Selim I, he consolidated his power in 1512 by executing his brother and nephew. Though brutal, it's a necessary action to ensure his position. After his position was secured, he quickly became interested in expansion to the Middle East. His first conquest being that to the east to the Safavid Empire, and took the land west of the Zagros mountain and north of Iraq, before he started to expand to Egypt. The Ottoman was victorious throughout the campaign in Mamluk Egypt, and by the end of the campaign, the Ottoman took control over all of Egypt, Levant, Palestine, and Hejaz, including Mecca and Medina. Around this time, the Sultan Selim I passed away. His successor took over power after his death, and the first thing the Ottoman did was modernizing and restructuring their law system inside the state. They also tried to expand their influence outward. In doing so, they caused a succession crisis in Hungary and expanded their influence on the Pannonian Basin. Next, they tried to expand to Austria because already mentioned the succession crisis. The succession crisis in Hungary is between the Transylvanian state and Habsburg Austria. Surprisingly, their offensive into Austria went poorly due to a lack of preparation. In the end, they partitioned Austria and Ottoman partitioned Hungary and started their rivalry that would last for centuries. Of course, the Austrian wasn't the only rival the Ottoman have made. To the east, the Safavid gone to war again with the Ottoman Empire, and this goes poorly for them, as the Ottoman able to defeat them and took Iraq from the Safavid, mostly completing the Ottoman Middle East conquest. During this time, the Ottoman Empire navy was greatly improved, and their influence even felt into the Indian Ocean, notably acquiring Aceh as their protectorate, and back in the Mediterranean Sea, they acquired Cyprus and Tunisia while having some conflict with the naval power of Venice. And on land, they able to crack down revolt on Yemen, conquered the Caucasus, and took the rest of North Africa up to Morocco. From here on, the Ottoman will experience decline, and while they will still achieve victory, their peak is almost over by now, as shown in the 1570s conflict against Austria and their own vassal in Romania. Although they don't lose anything significant, it still shows that the Ottoman was beginning to weaken, although not significantly. Another conflict they fought was against the Safavid Empire once again, during the early 1600s, in which they took a significant loss in the battlefield, and this halted their expansion into Europe. After a significant defeat, the Ottomans surrendered to the Safavid and returned much territory that had been ceded to them. During this time, a complicated tension and turmoil happened between multiple internal factions. I cannot explain any further, honestly. I don't really understand this. Only when Sultan Murad IV took power, then the empire somewhat stabilized, becoming a beacon of hope in the unstable empire. Not long after the Sultan took power, the Safavid once more began a campaign into the Ottoman, and this time the Ottoman took Iraq, and although in decline, they still managed to push back the Safavid dynasty and retook Iraq before signing a peace agreement. Soon, the Sultan Murad IV was passed away, and leaving his throne to his successor that, not long after being in charge, had already sparked a war with Venice over Crete. In the end, it is a stalemate, and because of the Sultan's incompetency during his reign, a revolt started to occur in 1640s that took down the Sultan and replacing him with Mehmed IV. Mehmed IV sought to recreate the military scene by Mehmed III by starting conflict with the Holy League, consisting of Poland, Lithuania, the Holy Roman Empire, Russia, Spain, and many more. Because of the defeat in the field, it is decided that the Sultan Mehmed IV would be replaced in 1687. But the war against the Holy League is not over just yet, and they still push way back to Serbia. But after the new Sultan took power, the Ottomans slowly pushed back Austrian a little before signing a humiliating peace treaty where they lose Hungary and only retaining Banat, and another separate peace with the Russian, where their influence over the Black Sea was weakened, and from this point forward they mostly stopped expansion and they will focus more on maintaining their border. But despite that statement, the Ottomans still have conflict due to the war in Sweden against Russia in the 1710s. The Ottoman helped out the Swedish by attacking southern Ukraine and the Donbas region, in which they saw success, and subsequently neutralizing Russia in 1714. Once more, they see success on the field, as they capture back Sparta from Venetian, but this war quickly spilled over to Austria, and kicking the Austro-Turkish War of 1617. But because of the Dutch and British trading routes get disrupted heavily, the three warring nation is forced to sign a peace treaty, and this ensure Ottoman rule over Sparta back. But unfortunately, this is at the cost of Austria seizing Belgrade, Banat, parts of Serbia, and Little Wallachia. During the 1730s, the Ottoman once again faced conflict against the Russian and the Austrian again. In the end, they managed to get back Serbia and Little Wallachia from Austria. After this peace was achieved, the Sultan began to look inward by making reform, laws, and order across the empire, while also stabilizing his reign by preventing a few potential uprisings. But of course, they wouldn't stay neutral forever. Russia began to press on their Black Sea influence in 1798. Is when another Russo-Turkic war erupted from this conflict, and this was an embarrassment defeat for the Ottoman, and they completely lost their Black Sea holding. During 1789, the French have their revolution, and the Napoleonic French was born. However, we are talking about the Ottomans, so we will skip all the way to 1798, when the French unexpectedly invade the Ottoman. by Egypt in order to cut off British shipment. The war was long and devastating, and they need British support to bail them out. With the British Navy, the Ottoman repels France back in 1801, ending the conflict. But after those conflicts, the Ottoman and France began to fix their relation, and even Napoleon wrote a personal letter to the Ottoman Sultan, proposing an alliance between the two. The Sultan declined by pointing out that the Russians have a plan ready at the moment if the Ottoman allies itself with the French. Although the two states still have a relatively good relation with each other, and this ties is further strengthened after Russian annexation of Bessarabia in 1812. Throughout the rest of the Napoleonic War, they didn't really do that much and sit around trying not to collapse. And after the end of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, there's peaceful era in Europe and to a certain extent to the Ottoman. However, a big part of the Ottoman decline was in its economy, as around this time, while the Europeans are industrializing, the Ottoman was still relying on its agricultural economy and only started very, very late in its industrialization path, in which down the line will lead them to weaken their economy and industry and cause them to start losing important war in the future. Such conflict that happened after the Napoleonic War can be seen here. The first war they fought was against the Persian and the Greeks' revolt. The Persian conflict was resolved easily with barely any changes, but the Greek one was way longer and later included Russia, Britain, and France. In the end, Greece achieved independence, although only stuck in Sparta, Athens, and the surrounding region. Next are the Egyptians, which launches a military campaign striking into the Levant. Funnily enough, the Egyptian in this time is actually still an Ottoman puppet, creating this weird, confusing mess of a civil war and independence movement. But the other great power, ironically, including Britain and Russia, forced the Egyptians to return everything east of the Sinai Peninsula. Not long after that, the Ottoman once more faced conflict against the Russians in the Crimean War, and this ended with a Russian loss. Although nothing much actually changes other than the reorganization of the Danubian Principality and some naval agreement. Another important thing during the war is that the Ottoman Sultan passed a law in which all classes and ethnicity will be treated equally in all matters of the empire, and this most likely be the last time the Ottoman will be a liberal empire, or a somewhat liberal empire, before they descend into a dictatorship into the future. Okay, this is truly entering the modern era, and I will start this in another Russo-Turkic War in 1877, where we could say that this is really where the Ottoman Empire was clearly declining. As Napoleon has been dealt with, the Russian could focus almost their entire complete attention on the Turks, using the Bulgarian massacre as an excuse, and slowly weather the Ottoman border directly or indirectly and chipped away the Ottoman external border. This war in 1877 see them take eastern Armenia and liberate the Danubian Principality and weaken the Ottoman influence in the South Slavic region by giving Serbia their independence and Bulgarian autonomy. Even the neutral Austria was giving Bosnia, and even France and Britain get Tunisia, Egypt, and Cyprus, even though they're the allies of the Ottoman. and Italy also got promised Tripolitania. One of my favorite YouTubers made a scenario about this exact war and how the Ottoman might survive to the modern day with this war. You should definitely check it out later. Out of this period, they continued to decline, shown with Greece slowly gaining land and Bulgaria gaining more territory and later independence. With the Italo-Ottoman War of 1911 that took the Tripolitania and some Dodecanese islands away from them, even though the Italian was promised Tripolitania in 1881. They only actually took it in 1912. And at that same year, the First Balkan War started. That took away most of their Balkan territory, including East Thrace, Thessalonica, Skopje, Albania, and much more, and only keeping a slither of land on the Bosporus Strait. But luckily, in the Second Balkan War, they were able to gain Eastern Thrace back from Bulgaria. Oops, take a look at the year. It's 1914. You know what it means. A certain Austrian duke got shot from a Serb and yada yada yada. The continent is now set on fire. To be noted, however, ever since the late 1800s, Europe is already very tense with a lot of conflicts almost happening, so the death of Franz Ferdinand aren't the only catalyst that could happen for World War I. In the beginning, the Ottoman actually didn't want to join the war, since they just gone to war 2 to 3 years back. Besides, they actually requested to join both sides, but initially were declined by both. And the Ottoman also just started to recover from the previous war, so starting a new war isn't really what's that? Some Ottoman general bombed Sevastopol, and now they're going to war in late 1914. Alright. Oh, okay. So the story is that Britain was promising the Ottomans some naval ship, but the outbreak of the Great War halted the ships to be transported to the Ottomans. So instead, the German Empire offered the Ottoman to give their ship in exchange of an alliance, and they used those ships, now with an Ottoman flag on it, to bomb Sevastopol to provoke Russia to declaring war on them, since they don't want to look like a bad guy by declaring war first. Back to the actual war, considering the circumstances, were doing relatively greater than they could have been, as they start an offensive into the Sinai Peninsula, threatening the Suez Canal and soaking up millions of Entente soldiers, while repelling a British invasion in Gallipoli, humiliating them, and by the end of 1917, they were able to take the Caucasus back. Because of the prolonged war, the Ottoman finally surrendered in 1918 and planned to be partitioned under the Treaty of Sèvres, which later was replaced by the Treaty of Sykes-Picot Agreement. Because of the Turkish War of Independence succeeding in repelling the Entente out of Anatolia, and the Turkish War of Independence also ended the long 600 plus year reign of the Ottoman Empire. Fun fact, the name of Istanbul only happened during the Turkish War of Independence, because before this it was called Constantinople all the time, only being changed in 1922 and not when Mehmet III took it. It is a misconception by many for an understandable reason, and so that is the video. That's all for today, and I see you on the next video. Bye bye.